Hello, everyone. Our next speaker today is Dr. Elizabeth Vernon-Grey, who is the Senior Associate Director for Undergraduate Research at the Center for Undergraduate Research and Fellowship, or CURF, of the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Vernon-Grey is responsible for helping undergraduates find meaningful and exciting research opportunities with Penn's outstanding faculty and supporting their research and application for national and international grants. I have personally received a lot of support from CURF to do research at Penn, so I am very honored to have Dr. Vernon-Grey present in our conference today. I want to remind all of our students to please ask questions using the Q&A chat if you have any during the presentation, and I will answer those with Dr. Vernon-Grey during the Q&A session. Now, please welcome Dr. Vernon-Grey as she speaks on the topic, Navigating Research as an Undergraduate Student. And I'm gonna turn our videos on and stop sharing for a minute. Hello.
Hello.
Now, Dr. Vernon-Grey, did you want me to share the poll that I made, or would you like to just start with your presentation?
Why don't we share the poll? People took the time to answer it. Let's have a look.
Oh, we actually would need to answer it now. So I would
Okay.
and
Let's do it now.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm gonna share my screen and then we'll do it from my end. So just give me 1 second. We have used this before. It's called Pear Deck. And what students will do is that you will log into this website. Just give it a second to load. And you will answer some questions that Dr. Vernon-Grey has prepared for the presentation. All right, so can everyone see this? Joinpd.com. So what you will do is you will go to this website and then join using this code. So we're gonna wait for some students to join. All right, so we have 3 students connected. We're gonna wait a little bit more until more people join. I'm gonna give maybe like 5 more seconds. All right, and I'm gonna start the class, but students are still able to join if you put the code over here, that it's on the top right. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first question. So what does undergraduate research mean to you? So we can show the responses. So we have some feedback from our students, applying content from the classroom to the real world, a chance to explore different fields of research that interest me, working under a mentor on an innovative project in either a wet lab or dry lab, exploring my interest and their application in different fields. Great. We have a lot of different responses.
I love that I'm seeing so many uses of the word exploration. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. Would you like me to keep scrolling through some of the questions or move on to the next question?
Let's go on to the next one.
Okay. If you want, you can ask it. You can ask the questions.
Okay. For those of you joining in the audience today, what do you hope to gain by participating in research?
All right, so we're gonna start showing some responses now. Let's see what our students said.
I like a mentor. Fantastic.
Yeah. Meaningful skills.
Meaningful skills.
Great.
Knowledge. new knowledge.
Yeah, being passionate about topics.
Uh-huh. Career
Great.
paths, better sense of topics. Passion, I like that.
Perfect. Let's move on to the next
Real world
question.
application.
Um,
So, for those of you who are attending today, I assume you're planning on participating in research, but if so, maybe you haven't thought about when you want to get started. When do you think you might want to get started?
so for this question, just put like a dot or a small mark near the time when you want to get started. And here you can see this is for undergraduate years and high school. And if you haven't gotten involved in research yet and you already graduated, maybe you can put a dot over here. But yeah, let's start seeing some of the responses. And I'm going to do overlaid.
Okay.
Cool. So some in high school. Yeah, so we see a lot of different responses, but a lot during freshman year, which I think is great to have an early start. All right, I guess I'm gonna stop sharing, and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so that you can go ahead and share yours.
Do mine again.
Yes.
You guys have my screen now?
Yes, we can see it.
Ah, got it. Okay. Let's see here. There we go. Okay. Thanks, Alejandra, for that introduction and for inviting me to speak with everyone today. I really am excited to have this time to spend with you. I hope it will actually end up being less of a presentation and more of a conversation insofar as these sorts of environments allow for that sort of thing. I think that by being here, that all of you are already on the right path to becoming good healthcare workers, because what we really care about in our healthcare workers is that they become lifelong learners. I've actually had the real privilege of attending some of the other talks that some of the guest speakers during the conference have had, and I'm going to be reiterating some of their messages. But I think what has really been driven home to me, and I hope you all have heard this message as well, is that there's no one right path. You just have to get on one and stick with it, pivot when you need to, and learn along the way. So you have to look no further than where we are in today's world with the current situation to know that our healthcare workers, our doctors, our nurses, wherever you are on that spectrum, need to be able to generate, synthesize, analyze, and respond to data, and that science is really the only way out of certain predicaments. So as Alejandra said, my name is Ann Vernon-Grey. I have a really long title at a really long office, a Senior Associate Director for Undergraduate Research at the Center for Undergraduate Research and Fellowships. We call it lovingly CURF at the University of Pennsylvania because everything has to have an acronym, and I will be using a lot of those, so I'll hopefully explain many of them along the way. As I just mentioned, I want to bring this up again today. If we were on campus, on Penn's campus, this would be the outside of our beautiful office, would be what it will look like in the spring, what it would look like in the fall, our friend Benjamin Franklin. And while I know not everyone in the audience today is from the University of Pennsylvania, I want to make sure that you all know that there is probably an office similar to the Center for Undergraduate Research and Fellowships at your institution. It may look a little bit different. Not many offices are structured exactly like ours, and it depends on the structure of the university and how the administration is laid out. So there could be an office of undergraduate research, for example, in the study abroad office or even in career services. So you should just have a little bit of a poke around to see what resources are available to you at your home institution. And if it turns out there isn't one, I will just say that all higher education institutions have faculty members who are at their institution because they're invested in the educational process of their students, and this is a really major one. So be on the lookout for mentors and for guidance wherever you can, if there isn't an office like this, but be sure to look for one similar. Okay, when you go looking for mentors and you're asking questions about what your interests are and looking to explore, one of the first things you actually might want to know is, what is research? I know at Penn, even though we're a major R1 university, and many students come here saying, I came to Penn because it's a major research university, I want to participate in research. I really don't have any idea what that means. So there's lots of definitions. It can be a little bit confusing. Formally, the definition is as follows: systemic investigation of materials and sources to establish new facts and reach new conclusions. You can think about it a little less formally as poking and prying with a purpose. My favorite quote of Albert Einstein's is actually that, and I mangle it just a little bit to say, research is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind. In other words, we are looking to generate new knowledge, as you guys alluded to in the Pear Deck, which is something I'm getting used to, and the lifelong learning, this being open to new information, is really what we're trying to do when we're participating in research. So really, research is any kind of project or study that results in new knowledge. And what may be of particular interest in why our office is set up the way it is, and maybe of particular interest to you, is that research often allows you to ask questions with an aim toward finding solutions that are going to benefit a larger community. So, sometimes people shy away from doing research because they think of it as something that only certain populations of individuals can do, or that is sort of locked away in an ivory tower and isn't going to have any real utility to humankind. I would try to argue you away from those really misconceptions. So when you're thinking about pre-health research, what does that look like, right? So if you finally get your head around what is research, and that sounds a little less scary, what does pre-health research look like? Well, it can look like this. So I'm hoping that everybody in the audience is groaning right now because they're thinking, oh yeah, that's actually what I thought. It's all wet lab research, or you have to be in a lab coat and you have to be moving tiny amounts of liquid from one tube to another. Well, again, my job here is to help you bust up some of these myths. So even in these 4 pictures where these individuals look like they're doing fairly similar things, I can tell you that one student could be investigating a real basic biological phenomena like the interactions between bacteria and archaea, and that could be pre-health research. You could have another student who's investigating the modulation of histones and how that impacts a particular biological phenomena like brain aging. You could have another student who's taking a more of an engineering approach, right? Who's looking at constructing nano methods of drug delivery. So something that looks a little bit more applied. Or you could have somebody who's doing something that I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but it's a much more organic chemistry approach to developing and synthesizing medicinal compounds in a more regulatable way. So even if you're talking about, I want to go and do wet lab research, or if you're feeling limited in that way, just know that wet lab research can entail a myriad of different kinds of opportunities. So, what else can pre-health research look like? Well, it can look like these things, right? So you could have a project where you were a little bit more patient-facing and you were looking at how patients feel about particular methods that are used on them in surgical situations. Or you could have an interest in global or rural health, right? So it could be a little bit more socially oriented, community-based. You could be someone who's leaning towards looking at new technologies and how machine learning, for example, can be used to predict certain kinds of outcomes. So don't get trapped in this bubble of it's either wet lab research or it's a set of preconceived notions that you have about things, that it has to be field-based, that it has to be biologically based. It could be any number of other categories. And so I don't want to dwell too long on this, but I think it's helpful to give some really concrete examples. So I want to say here, some categories, if that will help you approach the way that you're thinking about getting involved in healthcare research. You could think about it as technology and innovation. So a couple of concrete titles here. If you're thinking about interventions that you could use online, so social behaviors that can be modified through technological approaches. If you're thinking about gathering data from people's wearable monitors and trying to change health behaviors in that way. You could think about it about how patients consume information, about how they interact with the healthcare providers, right? So we have a group of doctors here who are actually also mothers who interact in the pediatric realm and who all of a sudden, as being consumers of medicine, thought about how do their patients take in information. And so they started this podcast to try to relate information to their consumers, i.e. their patients, in ways that was more digestible, more receivable for them. You could also be thinking about public health, how in the current opioid crisis, or how addictive materials are marketed to individuals and what impact that has on their health. You could be thinking about approaching it from an economics or health equity access kind of situation. So you're looking at, if we are going to establish an orthopedic surgical center in an environment where that could have a large economic impact, what will that look like? How socioeconomic consequences can feed into individuals starting in early adulthood. You could also look at something from, a community-focused or humanist approach, right? So we have students who are looking at science from a historical perspective and seeing how that feeds into some structural racial issues that remain, unfortunately, until today, or some anthropology approaches, right? Who can think about some cultural differences and how certain populations may receive healthcare from a healthcare provider. I also want to say that it could look like none of the above, right? So we could have students I have students all the time who are English majors, philosophy majors, physics majors, whatever it is that you are interested in, what triggers questions that keep you up at night that you want to have develop better answers for, that is the kind of research that you can get involved in. And by and large, the medical schools or the nursing schools or the PA schools or the graduate schools don't really care. They just want to know that you're engaged in this kind of active learning. So again, presumably those of you who are here are already predisposed to thinking that research is a good thing to do, but maybe you don't realize all of the benefits that you might derive from participating in it. So let me touch on some of those now. So first of all, research should be fun. Nothing is fun all the time, right? But you should definitely get some sense of enjoyment and satisfaction out of it. If you do not, if you've tried it, you've given it a red hot go and research is just really not your thing, medical schools in particular, it's not a requirement to get into medical school in the same way that it would be to get into graduate school or to do an MD, PhD, for example. It's never going to hurt you. Medical schools absolutely love for you to have research experience. And some of these other things that you will learn are reasons why. We can come back to that in a minute. But there are easier ways than forcing a large time commitment down your throat to sort of hone your skills and to make yourself a competitive applicant than participating in research that you just really do not like. So having said that, while you're doing research, you get to dive deeply into a field of your choosing. Does not have to be related to your major. At most schools, it doesn't even have to happen within your undergraduate school. When you're doing research and you're diving deeply into these fields, you get to be part of a larger network of individuals who are specialists in these fields. And you can certainly bet that when you're asking for letters of recommendation from a research advisor, you're going to get a totally different kind of a recommendation letter than you would from a professor with whom you've only taken one large lecture class. So on a purely transactional level, you can think about what it will do for your application processes. Another thing I will say is you can get paid to do research. That was a huge revelation for me when I was an undergraduate. I think it's probably a huge revelation to some of you. If you're on financial aid, part of a work-study program, you can leverage those mechanisms to participate in research instead of, for example, answering phones in an office. While we're on the subject of getting paid, there are lots of these so-called soft skills that you gain by participating in research, in addition to the technical skills that you will learn, that all employers, graduate schools, medical schools, further education school entities are really looking for when they're looking for a successful applicant. So these include all of the AAMC core competencies. If you look up those, everything that you learn during research, you will strengthen those skills by participating in research, all of those competencies that they are looking for. You will enhance your critical thinking. You will become a more resilient person, because let's face it, when you're doing research, things almost never go your way. It's 90% failure and 10% success, and that's being generous. So your resilience is sort of off the scales. You get to be more independent. You learn how to communicate your research. You identify as somebody who is a problem solver. And these are all things that everybody sort of post-university is looking for when they're looking to engage their next employee, fellow, graduate student, whatever that may be. So again, really you should do research because of all of these reasons, and not just boil it down to checking off a box to make yourself a more competitive applicant. If you're not enjoying it, if you're not learning these things from it, then it's maybe time to take a step back and reconsider why it is you're getting involved. Okay, so how do you actually go about getting started? For me, this always starts with really being honest about what interests you and identifying your existing skill set and strengths, and acknowledging where you may need to gain some knowledge or experience what things are missing. Do not continue doing things just because it's expected of you, either because you expect it of yourself or because your parents do, or because you've gotten on a path and you don't know how to get off. This is the time to really reset that button. If you're passionate about something, it will show through. So really think about what it is that you want to do, and carry with you your why, because you're going to have to explain it to a lot of different people, including yourself, as far as I'm concerned. So once you've done that, it's time to write it all down on a resume so it's in a written form. And then it's your chance to go about finding a mentor and applying for a program. So as you're thinking about when to get started, and you started on the introspective process, it's helpful to know that there are a couple of different ways to get involved in research as an undergraduate. The most common is to begin by assisting a faculty member with their own ongoing research. And this way you get to learn the ins and outs of how research is done without having to come up with your own ideas. Most universities have some sort of entry-level program. At Penn, it's called the Penn Undergraduate Research Mentoring Program, geared toward undergraduate students who don't have any prior research experience, so they can sort of solve that chicken and egg problem. Although I'm going to come back to this in a minute and say that most faculty members care less about what your technical skills are than you do. So that chicken and egg problem is probably more in your mind than it is actually in reality. There are also university-based programs, as I just mentioned, and national programs. I'll get to those here also in a little bit. But these are these so-called research experiences for undergraduates that you may have heard of, REUs, another acronym, that help you explore research opportunities at other universities. And then once you have sort of gotten your foot in the door by finding a mentor or participating in a program, you might then be ready to transition to being a somewhat more independent researcher. And I always get lots of questions about what does it mean to be an independent researcher? And what I will just say is that nobody is expecting you to be a fully sort of functional scientist at this point. They want you to be able to take ownership over the direction of your project. And that's what a lot of graduate schools and other sort of post baccalaureate institutions are looking for, is how deeply engaged you were in your research. And that may be one of the reasons why getting started earlier may be better. But I'll also say it's never too late. So there are probably also grants you can apply for to participate in these more sort of later stages, more inherently sort of deep levels of independent research. Actually, students who participate in these things tend to also be excellent candidates for fellowships as well, in which we can come back to a little bit later. So, you know, everybody says, think about yourself, what your interests are, and then just reach out to somebody, right? Just find a mentor. Well, I think that that can be a rate limiting step for a lot of people, because contacting faculty, there's this inherent sort of power dynamic. It doesn't matter how friendly we try to be, how approachable we may think we are, there's always this barrier to entry, right? And so I'm going to give you a few sort of practical tips on how to contact faculty, but I think it should always sound like you and not like me. So there's no one right formula, in the way that there's no one right path to whatever your chosen career is. But there are actually some hard no's on what you should not be doing. So the first thing I will say is, under no circumstances should you come off with a vibe of you're contacting them as a means to an end. Nobody wants to be a stepping stone, right? So you should never say, I'm reaching out to you because I want to get involved in research because medical schools say I have to have it. That is a big no, okay? You want to come off as someone who is, and in order to do that, you need to be genuinely interested in the work that they do. And you need to make it easy for them to respond to you, okay? This is I can't emphasize this enough. The easier it is for them to know why you're writing and what you want from them, the easier it will be for them to respond. So concise and effective presentation styles. I think a lot of students miss out on a specific subject line, which then makes their email looks a little bit like spam, which is unlikely to get opened. And then once they open it, if a faculty member does open it and they're faced with, you know, a tome, a whole page of words, it can be really too easy to just say, you know what, I'll deal with that later and come back to it. And whether they do or not is another question. So shorter, always better than longer. And it really should go without saying, but absolutely you need to use a formal title and tone. I'm a pretty relaxed individual, but if I get an email from a student saying, what's up, Anne? Like, I'm gonna react to that in a different way than if the first time I'm meeting you, it says, Dear Dr. Vernon-Grey, you know, here's who I am, here's what I'm asking for. Probably after that, I'll write back and sign my name Anne, and it will be totally fine for you to refer to me at that point. But you'd be surprised. I've started putting that in my presentations because it happens more frequently than it should. Then you need to introduce yourself, right? I need to know who you are, but I don't need to know a whole lot about you. Maybe a sentence, maybe 2 sentences about, you know, what your name is, what your graduation year is, what you're majoring in, or what you're interested in. Really, the bulk of the email should be spent on answering the question, why me? Why are you writing to me out of the thousands of faculty members who do similar sorts of things, right? And you can do that in a number of different ways. The key points here are, you want to give them some context about how you found them. You want to demonstrate that you've done your homework about what it is that they do, and not only what it is they do, but how they do it. I can't tell you the number of times that students would, you know, approach me wanting to be involved in my research, and all of a sudden they would find out that it was animal based, and they would say, oh, just kidding, I don't want to work with animals, right? That's a problem. That means you haven't read their work, and it means you've wasted everybody's time. So you want to let them in on your thought process of why it is that you think what it is that they do is interesting and how it might fit into your academic goals. Then you want to give them a suggested time about when you can meet. Now, that's not going to be in person for the foreseeable future. So, you can indicate when you're available and on what platforms you're happy to meet. Obviously, you want to say, if these times aren't convenient for you, I'm happy to accommodate your schedule. And then attach a resume. The resume allows you to keep your email short. And it also allows you to spell out in more detail how it is you've gotten to where it is that you are in your particular educational career and pathway. Now, please do not get too hung up on the fact that you don't have 10 years worth of relevant experience. Again, I think faculty have demonstrated again and again that what they're more interested in is somebody who's committed, who knows that they have time to invest in this, who's genuinely interested, who's a self-starter, who, depending on the kind of research, who is a good oral communicator. Maybe they need to work with patients, and so you need to be someone who has excellent people skills. Maybe you are somebody who's going to be doing a lot of written communications, and so you need to have excellent writing skills. Maybe you just in general are a very details oriented person. Whatever, again, those transferable or soft skills that you could have learned doing any previous sort of stereotypical high school job, those are the things that you could also highlight in your resume. And then follow up, give everybody a second chance, but nobody is going to be impressed if you follow up in the next 2 to 24 hours. Give them a little bit of time to respond. Now, when I went back to the context about how did you find them, let me go back and just say, starting with the faculty members who teach your classes, talk to your TAs, the people who run your labs, people you've interacted with in your own healthcare situations. There are so many different people that you can find. Departmental talks at universities are happening all the time, and they may not seem like they're accessible to undergraduates, but they so are. You may go and not understand a single word that they're saying, but over time, it's learning a new language. Over time, you will begin to absorb it, and you'll start seeing familiar faces, and hopefully you'll become comfortable enough at some point to ask a question, because I can guarantee you that not many other students are doing that. Go to office hours. So many faculty members are sitting in their office during office hours doing their own work because no students are coming to talk to them, okay? Probably not true right around exams or homework times, but the rest of the time, that's an excellent opportunity to go and have something substantive that's not, a problem that you get to go talk to them about. So hopefully that will assuage a little bit of your worries about contacting faculty, but I can certainly answer your questions about that later. So to go back and talk about some of the programs that students often get involved in research through, I mentioned some of at least the Penn specific programs that we have. I'm not knowledgeable enough to speak about all of the various institutional ones that may be held at your institutions, but suffice to say that I think they probably exist. I'm now going to switch a little bit and talk about some of the national programs. This is by no way, shape, or form meant to be comprehensive. I just want to signal to you that they exist, some of the flavors of them, and where you yourself can search for more. So for example, this is where all of the acronyms will come back into play. So there's the short-term research experience for underrepresented individuals. This one is actually sponsored by a specific branch of the NIH, the diabetes, digestive, and kidney disease sector, although you do not have to be doing research in that area to apply for that. I should have said at the beginning that all of these programs have some things in common. They typically happen over the summer. They typically happen, they're typically 8 to 12 weeks in length. They are sort of designed to inundate you full time with various different aspects of science. And when I say that, I mean that really more generally, because as you'll see as we go through, some of them are geared toward MD, PhD students, some of them are geared toward underrepresented students, some of them are geared toward undergraduate, undergraduates, some of them are geared toward students who have a little bit more experience, some of them are regional, some of them are subject specific. But the take-home message is that they're trying to, again, solve what I think you all perceive as this chicken and egg problem. So Step Up is one of those opportunities. There's the Gateways to Laboratory Summer Program run through the Leadership Alliance, which is, as I mentioned, focused on MD, PhD applicants. They have, in addition to the sort of technical skills that you're learning in a laboratory setting, you'll also be doing journal clubs, mock MCATs, career development workshops of that sort. And all of these programs will have these pedagogical elements built into them. The summer internship program, which I think is possibly the worst named one because it's not specific at all, is maybe one of them that you've heard of is the Amgen program. It has 10 different sites. They will pay for you to get there. They'll pay for you to get home. They'll pay for your meals while you're there. Many of these were modified. I don't know if anybody had the opportunity to take part in them. They opened them up this summer virtually. Again, most of these programs, because they happen over the summer, will come with a stipend and are quite selective because of that. There's the Summer Health Professions Education Program, which is also was formerly known, if anybody knows about it, the Summer Medical and Dental Education Program, which they changed the name to be a little bit more inclusive. I've heard this one described as a sort of a mini med or dental school. So you can guess about what their focus is on. I want to bring up the Summer Public Health Scholars Program. This one, just to highlight the fact that it's different than the others in that it's focused on public health instead of on basic science, like some or specific scientific training programs like some of the other ones are. The last one on this slide is the Alliance for Health Reform. That happens in the DC area, and this is focused a little bit more on public policy around health and health economics decisions. So what I really want to signal by using this slide is you can search for these kinds of programs at the two websites that are listed below. The nsf.gov one is the sort of more formal REU one, but I like to search by pathways-to-science.org just because it has it's a little more user-friendly. And has a little bit more numbers of filters and ways to sort of discern which program might be relevant for you. So I hope you will take advantage of those should they prove of interest. And then I want to provide some final thoughts. If you take nothing else away from this, my advice to you is don't stop asking questions. Ask more questions. Explore fearlessly. Ask questions of your peers. Ask questions of the people directly ahead of you in this process. Ask questions of me. Ask questions of the people you come into contact. I wish I had done more of this when I was younger. I would have made many, many fewer mistakes, or I would have made different mistakes, but it would have saved me, I think, a lot of time. Explore fearlessly. Again, faculty members, they are where they are because they care in the next generation of people, the people who are going to sort of come behind them and take their place. So as scary as we may seem, you know, the worst they can say is no, or really just ignore you. And that's not hard to do. So you're not going to be bothering people. You just sort of need to take ownership of the direction of your maturation and ask questions and explore. Don't put yourself in a box, whether that's the kind of research you're interested in or the kind of further education you want to do. Life is too short. There's just too many different directions you can go to be doing something out of a sense of obligation or some external pressure. And then when you put yourself out there, you're making them say no. Don't limit yourself because you think you're unqualified, because you don't think you have the requisite skills, because you think your GPA is not good enough or you didn't do enough of this or whatever. You know, I was listening to some of the talks earlier, and while I thought they were fantastic, it was scaring me to death. I was thinking I didn't plan 10 years out for this particular thing or whatever. It should feel like a stretch. You should never really feel ready for your next step. If you were ready, you're not pushing yourself into new areas. So that is what I have to say about that. And we can stop now. I would love to see what questions you all have and what I can help with.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Vernon-Grey, for your great presentation.
Hmm.
Now we will start reading the questions that have most votes. So students, if you have any questions, please keep posting them in the chat. Let's see, the first question says, what time of the school year is the best to find a research placement? The beginning of the fall semester, right before the summer, etc.
Okay. So the real answer to this question, I'm really not trying to be flippant, is it depends on you. So research doesn't happen on an academic schedule like coursework does. So you can start whenever you are ready, and that can depend on how much time you have available, how prepared you feel like you are, when you make your connections, all those sorts of things. Now, if you're thinking about one of these programs that I talked about, those almost entirely happen over the summer. And so that will need to happen over the summer. Having said that, the applications for those summer programs happen way sooner than you think they're going to. So you need to start looking for those things. I mean, some of them open in like October, November. And some of them also have are done on sort of a rolling scale. And so if you apply early, you actually get preference. Not all of them, but some of them do. And so I would encourage you to look sooner than you think you need to. That would be my answer. But for if you're talking about working with a faculty member, it often doesn't matter. Now, faculty members may have a preference themselves about, some of them actually like to work with students during the academic year because it gives them a chance to work with a student for 5-10 hours a week and sort of see if it's a good fit before they sign up for a full-time summer gig. Others like to work with students over the summer because it gives them, that's when you're less distracted and you have more time to really focus on the research. And that way, when you come back in the fall, you can really hit the ground running and know better how to balance your coursework and your research responsibilities. So it wasn't a concrete answer, but I hope it really addresses the base of the issue.
Okay, thank you so much. The next question is, what does virtual lab research look like in the age of COVID-19? And how can we get involved even though we're not on campus in person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is a tough time, and we hope that it's not going to last forever. I think that at least at Penn, and I hear from a lot of our colleagues, right, that faculty members were really able to robustly and rapidly pivot to online sort of simulations of what it was that they would do in a hands-on laboratory situation. So what it could look like is, let's say you were already in the laboratory and you generated data previously, then you get a chance to analyze that, really dive deeper and plan out your next experiment. Insofar as, if you weren't already in the laboratory, actually, I think, with full acknowledgement that the umbrella situation of today is hard. I think that actually is a silver lining in terms of, as a scientist, as a wet lab scientist, sometimes we tend to jump into things and get started sort of just doing things maybe a little bit earlier than we really should because we can, right? And it's fun. And so I think this enforced pause can really allow breathing time to say, here's where the field is now. Here's the reading I need to do to identify a question that needs to be answered. And here's what I would do if I were in the laboratory. And that can result in, a literature review. It can result, many of our students are actually publishing reviews in peer-reviewed journals because they have had this time to really do this, what I call the thought experiment. And that's been a really fruitful area of research. It's a really great time to practice your grant writing skills and to do a proposal so that hopefully then when you hit the ground running again, relatively soon, you have a document that you can go back to so that when you're tied up in the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day things, you can go back and review that and say, oh yeah, that's why I was thinking about doing that experiment, right? Because if you're tied up in the day-to-day, sometimes you can pretty easily lose sight of the big picture.
Great, thank you so much. And I also wanted to add a little thing on top of your response. We heard from Yentley earlier that she's doing most of her research remotely, and she brought up getting technical digital skills or learning how to code and things like that. So if you're a student who doesn't have a research experience at the moment, maybe you can look into a lab and see what type of coding they need and start learning a little bit, and then reach out to the faculty member.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Alana. I think there are certain types of research that take a little bit more imagination to see how they would translate into a virtual space, and some of them just do it really quite naturally. And so now is a fantastic. I mean, I've been telling students for years, right, that they need to learn how to code. They need to learn how to do some of these statistical programs, because this is the way the fields are moving. So if you don't have it, now's the great time to do it. But some of them, some fields, it actually feels like less of a transition than anything else, because, if biochemists are, if you're doing, sort of virtual protein modeling, for example, you're sitting behind a computer all the time anyway. So I think what's harder for people to imagine is really the running of gels and the operations on mice, or the things of that nature, the staining of slides. And I think the reality is that just at the moment, those things are not possible. So it is wise to think about what other technical skills you can learn in the interim.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Let's answer the next question. And this one is from our panelists. And I also want to add something to it at the end. So if I'm in a research lab currently, how would you recommend asking your PI if you could help writing a review or paper? And I want to add to that, if I already have been working in a lab, what types of things can I do to, enrich my experience as a researcher, like presenting my poster or getting a fellowship or things like that?
Mm-hmm. So again, I think this goes with, the maturation process that allows you to take ownership over your own education and the direction of your own projects. It's super scary to have, to approach a faculty member cold and say, it's scary enough to say, can I participate in your research, right? It's a whole other thing to then say, even if you've been working with them for a while, can I help write this article, or can I do this other thing? That seems maybe beyond your reach. Again, I think I already told you my philosophy is make them say no, right? So you don't want to walk in and act like this is a privilege or an opportunity that is owed to you. That's never going to come across well, right? But if you come across from a sincere perspective of wanting to learn more and get more involved, almost always the answer is going to be yes, or a modified no, right? Not right now, but why don't we work on this first? Or but regardless of the answer, it reveals to your mentor that you're eager, that you're hungry, that you want more responsibility. And I can't say enough about that either, just because we are not mind readers. People come into our groups for all kinds of different reasons. It could be, just a time filler, right? Or they're trying something out on their way to go doing something else, or they just need the money, or whatever other reasons, right? And I'm going to engage with those students. I'm happy to have those students. I mean, not if they're flippant about it, but I'm happy to engage those students. But I'm going to give them a different kind of experience than I do if I am working with a student who says, I'm planning to go to graduate school. I want to eventually, having paid my dues, have ownership over my own independent project. I want to get practice writing. I want to present at conferences. I want to attend these poster workshops, whatever it is, right? You have to let people know, or they won't know. They can't read your mind.
All right, thank you so much. I think we still have time for one question. Is that fine?
Sure.
Okay, this one says, what would a follow-up email look like after a week of waiting for the PI to respond,
Mm-hmm.
so that they don't put pressure on them or seem impatient?
Right. Right. So I think after investing the time that you need to write a good first email, the second one doesn't need to be very involved, right? You maybe, so the only time I would really do something more than writing to say, dear Professor so-and-so, I'm writing further to my email, so re-forward that email. I'm writing further to my email of X date. Um, I know this is a particularly busy time of year, or we're in a currently unusual situation, but I remain very interested in your work. I look forward to hearing from you either way, kind of thing. Doesn't need to be overly involved. You've probably said everything you need to say in putting in all that effort to get the email right the first time, right? Now, if in that week you've read an additional paper or had some additional interaction, maybe you talked to another faculty member and they recommended you reach out to them, or you saw them give a talk or something like that, you can always add that kind of little piece of information in there. But as a general rule, just short and sweet, again, is the winner there. Again, you're not going to be bothering them. If they're going to ignore you, they're just going to keep ignoring you, right? There's nothing you can do about that. But if they are going to respond, at least, speaking from personal experience, if I'm going to respond, I'm like, oh man, let me, go ahead and get back to that email, even if it's just to say, sorry, I can't do it right now or whatever, but at least you get a response. And I feel like most of my colleagues are in that same situation. You got to give them the benefit of the doubt and give them another ping. And far from feeling like you're annoying them or pressuring them, they're just going to be like, oh, my bad.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for your presentation. It was an honor to have you speak at our conference. So we're very grateful.
Good luck to everyone and be
Yeah.
well.
Thank you.